Tank tops aren't in the dress code, darling. Cover it up. You're making the real troops uneasy. The words sliced through the firing line like a cold blade. Aiden Wolfe didn't flinch. She stayed low beside the weapons rack, adjusting a rifle scope with steady hands, jaw locked, eyes unshaken. Then it happened. Her shoulders shifted, and the mark appeared. Skull, Anchor, Trident, SEAL Team 6. 3 names etched beneath in bold ink. The air went still. Then footsteps, heavy, commanding, 4 gleaming stars. General Marcus Keene stepped forward. He said nothing, didn't even blink, just fixed his gaze on the tattoo before offering a slow, deliberate salute. The heckler laughed again. What is this? Some kind of joke? Eden rose, meeting his eyes. Those names, cold as steel. Her voice didn't waver. One of them died saving you. But he didn't get it. Couldn't. Not yet. What followed would shake the whole base. And if you're watching now, you're about to learn why Eden Wolfe was never destined to be ordinary. Drop your location in the comments. Subscribe to Veteran Biker for the rest of the story. And don't miss tomorrow's chapter. The ghosts never sleep, neither do we. She kept working, lining up the rail mount, tightening it with careful precision. The hush spread like ripples in still water as more heads turned. From the upper catwalk, a pair of polished boots appeared. Boots that didn't belong to any trainee or range instructor. General Marcus Keene emerged, halting mid-step as if something invisible had caught him off guard. His frame went rigid. This was a man who'd weathered 3 Afghan tours, 2 battlefield wounds, and worn a bronze star for valor. He didn't freeze over trivial things, but his focus was locked, not on her face, on the ink. He descended slowly, hand rising toward the brim of his cap. His aide started to speak, but a small gesture cut him short. On the floor below, even the toughest NCOs had stopped mid-drill. The woman hadn't raised her voice, hadn't drawn a weapon, hadn't given an order. Still, the air was different now. Keene's boots struck the range with the measured pace of authority, but this time the weight behind him wasn't command. It was uncertainty. Eden rose without hurry, unaware of the waves she'd created. She wiped her palms on a cloth, then took up a torque wrench, securing the stock with one precise turn. Her arm flexed, bringing the entire tattoo into view. The skull, the trident, the seal of a unit spoken of only in whispers by those who had bled for it. Keene stopped 3 steps short, his breath snagged. It couldn't be. She hadn't aged a day since that blurred photo in her sealed file. Her braid was shorter, her eyes sharper, but the stance was the same. That unbroken posture, that habit of mapping exits without shifting her head. It was the look of someone who'd survived too many missions gone wrong. He swallowed. Chief Wolfe! The words carried reverence, not command. The tension between them tightened like a drawn bowstring. Eden turned her head, slowly, eyes meeting his with distant recognition. Keene lifted his hand in a crisp salute, not for ceremony, but in debt. Eden didn't return it. She simply held his gaze, calm and unyielding. And in that suspended moment, the range seemed to realize what stood before them. Not just a woman in a tank top with a rag in one hand and a rifle on the bench, but a phantom. A living legend whispered about on night watches and in dim bars. Rumors of a female SEAL, impossible by the rulebook, who vanished after a mission, erased from every log. And now she stood here, in full daylight, sweat on her skin, silence in her wake, wearing the emblem of a unit most dared not name. Permission to stand in your shadow, Keene said softly. Confusion swept the gathered soldiers. Some turned fully toward them. Others lowered their weapons. Eden's nod was barely a movement, but it was enough. Keene dropped his hand. "She was never meant to be seen again," he murmured to himself. "But you dragged the ghosts home with you, didn't you?" Keene muttered, glancing at his aide. "Clear the schedule." In that instant, the highest-ranking man on base wiped his day clean, just to stand beside a woman who'd spoken fewer than 5 words in 2 years. Because sometimes ink says more than medals, and ghosts don't take orders to haunt the living. Long before she became a whispered myth in a tank top, Eden Wolfe was just a name scribbled in the margins of military files, flagged not for misconduct, but for a kind of potential that made command uneasy. She was 23 when she entered Naval Special Warfare Prep, already outpacing most men in strength, marksmanship, and psychological tests. No woman had made it this far, not in this program. The instructors tried to crack her early, dropping her into the crucible. 72 hours of survival hell with no backup, no map, no food, and no light. On the second night, search teams nearly pulled her for frostbite when the temperature plunged below 0. By morning, she had already cleared her 3rd extraction point. When they finally caught up, she was roasting a field rat over a tin can stove. She looked up, nodded once, and said, "Not the worst vacation I've had." That's when someone in a closed office started paying attention. Not officially, of course. Eden's name moved to a shadow roster, unacknowledged, tested in live scenarios that never appeared in the logs. One of those missions sent her to the Syrian border, embedded with a contractor unit reportedly under siege by cartel-backed insurgents. She went in with only a pack, an encrypted sat phone, and a sidearm. 5 days later, she came out with 17 survivors, civilians included, ready for evac. No ceremony, no press, just another classified line in an eyes-only file. In her 5th year, she was designated Ghost 7, a member of a prototype unit built to operate beyond oversight. The kind you send when diplomacy is already ashes, and open military action would start a war. Ghosts weren't nicknames, they were function. They went where no one admitted to sending them, left without leaving a trace, and the missions they survived were buried deeper than Arlington. There were 7 in her last team, Ghost Team Delta. No real names, just call signs. Eden's was Ghost 7. Theirs were etched on their gear, never spoken aloud. Safer that way. Operation Ember Lens wasn't supposed to be a massacre. It was a quiet grab. Intercept a rogue CIA asset, selling classified arms to a hostile militia on the Pakistan-Afghan border. In and out, minimal footprint. They'd done worse with less. But somewhere, in a spotless office far from the dirt, someone changed the extraction point without warning them about colliding tribal factions. They walked into a kill box. 3 were dead in the first 20 minutes. Marcus Chen took shrapnel to the lungs. Jacob Reyes fell covering the east approach. Aaron Cross shoved Eden out of a sniper's sightline and took the round meant for her throat. She killed 14 men in 47 minutes. No rifle, just a knife, and the pistol she'd later hang in her garage out of guilt. She carried Cross's body for over a mile before the EVAS team forced her to let go. She came back with their blood still in her hair. The Navy offered her the Distinguished Service Cross. She refused. "Medals are for graves," she told them. "The living carry the weight." 6 days later, her resignation went through. The file was sealed. The team's loss was buried under classified ink. Eden Wolf disappeared. The only proof she'd ever served were 3 names tattooed under the sealed trident on her left arm: Chen, Reyes, Cross. Her shadow walked with them, every step, every morning. For 5 years no one spoke her name, until the morning a 4-star recognized ink no one else was meant to see. At Fort Tannisville, days blurred together like brass casings on hot concrete. Sunrise meant weapons checks. Noon meant drills. By dusk, the wind carried the scent of oil, sweat, and metal downrange. I then arrived before reveille every day, parked in the farthest lot, walked the long stretch to the armory, with a steel case in one hand and silence in the other. No greetings, no questions about why she skipped morning briefings or base socials. She wasn't in the chain of command, just a civilian contractor, a ghost with a toolbox. To most, she was the woman who cleaned rifles. Sometimes better than anyone, sometimes worse, depending who you asked. Sergeant Travis Rock made sure of the worse part. Tall, lean, loud, his grin always crooked, as if every sentence he spoke was the start of a private joke at someone else's expense. Respected for his efficiency, toughness, and his knack for spotting weakness, he'd decided Eden was either weak or didn't belong. He made a sport of it. "Hey, Wolf," he called one morning, tossing a CLP-soaked rag onto her bench. "Pretty sure you missed a spot on the latrine door yesterday. Want me to draw you a diagram?" She didn't respond. She kept running the cleaning rod through the battered M27, each stroke deliberate, unhurried. Another soldier chuckled. "Pretty sure she only got this gig through some veteran charity thing," he said. "Probably married someone who actually served," another added. Rock's grin widened. "Or maybe she thinks standing near rifles makes her tough by osmosis." Eden didn't glance up. The bolt carrier slid into place with a smooth final click. No retort, no reprimand. The silence around her was heavy, practiced. The younger troops followed the sergeant's lead. The older ones kept their eyes elsewhere. But there were cracks in their assumptions. Eden never used manuals, never cross-checked Torca settings, never hesitated over part choices. Her motions were too clean, like she'd done the work in darkness, under fire, when seconds bled lives. More than once, an operator handed her a malfunctioning sidearm and got it back within 20 minutes, running better than new. Still, she remained the quiet shadow in the corner. In the 3rd week, Rock decided to push harder. He strode into the armory mid-morning carrying an oldie SR-25, like it was a prize. Its matte finish was chipped, the scope skewed, the sling frayed, as though dragged through gravel and regret. The room hushed as he crossed to her bench. "All right, everyone," he called, voice casual but carrying. "Time for a little test." He dropped the rifle onto the table with a heavy clank. "Contractor Wolf here thinks she knows her way around weapons. Let's see how she does with this." His smirk returned. "Call it continuing education." Some of the younger soldiers snorted. Eden set down the barrel she'd been cleaning, fingers moving toward the SR-25 with a touch more reverence than the crowd expected. "Take your time, sweetheart," Rock said, folding his arms. "We know thinking's not your strong suit." She didn't answer. She turned the rifle over once, eyes tracing the upper receiver, mag well, and scope mount. No breakdown, no power-up, just a quiet verdict. Gas tubes bent, 3 degrees off-center, steel-cased rounds, probably 700 plus, scored the port. Buffer springs overcompressed. Mounts are loose. Stress fractures here and here. She tapped twice. Trigger group's full of dust. You left it chambered during a sandstorm or something just as stupid. She set it down gently. And the locking lugs have heat expansion microcracks. This rifle's not just dirty. It's dying. The room was still. Rock blinked. She hadn't even opened it. And yet everything she said could be confirmed on close inspection. He tried to laugh, but it came out dry. Lucky guesses. Eden turned back to the M27, wiping the barrel as if nothing had happened. But the air had shifted. Even the ones who used to laugh were now watching with something colder than respect. Doubt. By week's end, Rock was quieter. Not apologetic, never that, but sharper, like an itch he couldn't name had settled under his skin. She'd passed his test. Worse, she'd passed it without breaking stride. And now his unit wasn't laughing anymore. So he doubled down. At morning roll call. Armory eval coming up. Senior Command wants field weapons inspected live for readiness. Wolf, you're on point. Eden looked up. I wasn't on the roster. You are now. This time, Rock didn't smile. He'd prepared, planting 3 faulty rifles among the racks, each with subtle internal sabotage. Loose pins, mismatched buffers, a backwards assembled trigger group that still passed a quick glance. When Eden stepped into the inspection bay, half the barracks had gathered, some eager for her to fail, others just curious. She moved without hurry, each weapon checked by sight, then touch. No showmanship, no notes, just eyes, hands, and memory. The second rifle stopped her. Wrong locking lug, a hair short. Bolt carriers from a different lot. It'll fracture under sustained recoil. An inspector checked the logs, then nodded silently. By the third rifle, the onlookers had gone quiet. Rock's jaw tightened. His trap wasn't springing. And then, it did. Just not the way he planned. Eden leaned forward to check the last carbine. Her tank top shifted. The air in the room had turned stifling. Her uniform jacket had long been knotted around her waist. Sweat traced the curve of her shoulder and upper back, and just above her shoulder blade, sliding into full view, was the tattoo. Not the partial glimpse from earlier. This time, the entire emblem. SEAL Team 6. Skull, anchor, trident, and beneath them, 3 stars. Names etched so fine they might have been branded in. A corporal across the space spotted it first. He froze, nudged the soldier beside him. That one pulled out his phone, not to record, but to zoom in for confirmation. He said nothing, simply posted the still to the unit's internal channel without a caption. 7 minutes later, it had circulated across the base. Within 10, it reached the desk of a man who hadn't seen that ink in over a decade, General Marcus Keene. When Keene opened the image on his secure tablet, he stopped mid-step in the middle of a hallway. His fingers tightened around the frame. It wasn't just the design. It was the skin it lived on, the faint scars around it, the precision in every line, the tilt of that shoulder. He'd seen it before, in a field hospital in Helmand, back when Ghost 7 had dragged his recon unit out of an ambush that should have ended with their names on a wall. He keyed his earpiece. Divert my route. Clear my staff. I want eyes on Fort Tannisville Armory. In 20, quietly. Yes, sir, his aide stammered. I said 20. Clear the corridor. Back at the range, Eden was finishing her inspection. The air around her had gone unnervingly still. Conversations had faded to whispers. Faces turned toward her now, without mockery, something closer to reverence. She didn't notice, but Roe did. He watched the change spread like a storm front, saw how the ones who used to snicker now avoided meeting her eyes. How no one laughed when she passed. He tracked the murmured, "Did you see that ink?" And the private who straightened to attention as she brushed by. That night, Rowe logged into the secure archive channel, punching in a clearance code unused for 2 years. He searched a unit that didn't officially exist. One image appeared, a declassified still from an old hostage extraction op. Grainy, dust-filled, but one figure at the center, knife in one hand, pistol in the other, head turned just enough to reveal a stance that sent his pulse climbing. On the left arm, a trident, identical to hers. By morning, the silence around Eden had shifted. It wasn't cold anymore. It was careful. She walked into the range with her same quiet stride, jacket loose around her waist, tank top darkened with heat. No one jeered. No one tossed rags. The ground beneath their jokes had cracked, and no one wanted to stand too close to the edge. Rock, however, wasn't done. He leaned in the shadow of the loading bay, arms folded, watching her unpack a rifle case. His eyes tracked every move. "You hiding something, Wolf?" he asked. She didn't answer. "Just here to check the buffer alignment on an M4 and move on?" He stepped forward. "That ink looks damn authentic. Maybe too authentic. You know impersonating a special warfare unit is a federal offense." She slid the bolt forward. "Then what?" The words dropped like a hammer. He blinked. "You think that stare scares me? I've seen operators fake worse. You show up all mystery. Let us guess." "I didn't let you guess," she said evenly. "You decided to." It was more than she'd spoken to him in a month. Rock leaned close, voice low. "You don't get to wear 3 names on your arm and act like you earned them unless you can prove it." Her eyes narrowed, not in threat, but in grief. "They're not mine to prove," she said quietly. "They're mine to remember." He recoiled as if struck. No anger, no defiance, just truth and sorrow. The tension lingered long after they parted. She went back to work, she always did. But someone else had been watching. From the far corner near the long rifles, Leo Delgado stepped out. Few even knew he'd been on duty. He crossed the concrete with slow, deliberate steps, sleeves rolled up, grease marking his hands. He stopped at her bench. She didn't look up, but he nodded once. To Rock, still by the door, Leo spoke loud enough for the room to hear. "Ever wonder why no one's touched her?" "This whole time?" Rock's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Leo peeled the wrap from his forearm and pushed his sleeve higher. Ink, aged but clear, covered his bicep. The same trident, the same anchor, the same skull. Only his bore an extra mark, a vertical slash through the skull. Overwatch designation. "I was Cross's swim buddy," Leo said quietly. "Bud S. 249. Before he deployed, he told me if anything happened, there was someone who'd carry the weight. She didn't ask for backup, but some ghosts don't walk alone." Eden didn't speak, but her hands stilled over the trigger assembly, just for a moment. Rock glanced between them. "You were watching her." Leo kept nodding, because he knew a day would come when people wouldn't understand the weight she carried, and someone would have to remind them. Around the room, no one moved. Even the usual low laughter, the kind that clung to the air like smoke, had disappeared. Because when you see 2 ghosts in daylight, the only respectful thing to do is stay silent and let them pass. The morning sky over Fort Tannisville was sharp and cloudless, the kind of surgical blue that made steel glare too bright. Troops stood in tight formation across the west field, boots aligned, rifles set, the low hum of pre-inspection tension running like current through the ranks. On days like this, precision was everything. Every crease crisp, every bead of sweat forbidden without permission. The brass was coming. Everyone felt it. But no one expected the man who stepped from the armored black SUV that rolled to a stop just past the parade ground. 4 stars gleamed on General Marcus Keene's shoulders. His stance was rigid, despite the years on his frame, his expression unreadable, the stillness before a long-remembered storm. He wore his dress greens today, because when the dead return to life, you meet them wearing your honors. He didn't speak as his aide followed him out, didn't greet the base commander or shake hands. His eyes scanned the field until they found her. Eden was off to the right, separate from the formation, standing near the weapons staging area. Same as always, tank top, boots, a jacket tied at her waist, and ink exposed in the sunlight. Keene moved before anyone thought to stop him, cutting through the lines like wind through tall grass. Soldiers shifted instinctively aside, unsure what rule applied now. "Sir," the base colonel hurried to catch up, "do you need a podium?" But Keene had already walked past the front rank and kept going until he stood before Eden Wolfe. She didn't move, didn't flinch, and Keene, he did something no one had seen from a man of his rank in decades, least of all towards someone out of uniform. He came to a halt, straightened, and brought his hand up in a flawless salute. Fingers tight, eyes locked, not on a subordinate, but on an equal. A legend, a soldier whose war had never earned a parade. Eden blinked once. Her face stayed unreadable, but the entire base seemed to freeze. This wasn't in any protocol. The wind itself stilled. Dozens of troops, SEALs, Rangers, officers. Every gaze was on her. Keene lowered his hand with deliberate weight, then spoke without a microphone, his voice carrying to every ear within range. Chief Petty Officer Eden Wolfe, Ghost 7, first of her line, last of her team, sole survivor of Operation Ember Lens. The words hit like detonation. The formation rippled. Someone audibly gasped. A younger SEAL nearly lost his grip on his rifle. "She's the reason I'm breathing," Keene continued. "Her team pulled the mine out in Kandahar. Pinned down, no way out. She appeared through the dust, took down 3 hostiles before we could react, dragged one of ours a half-click through fire, and was gone before we could thank her. I've waited 15 years to give her this salute." The silence after was heavier than steel. Eden slowly lifted the edge of her tank top over her shoulder, revealing the full tattoo, the SEAL Team 6 insignia, skull, trident, anchor. Below it, 3 names, Marcus Chen, Jacob Reyes, Aaron Cross, and beneath them, in fine lettering, never forgotten. The ranks shifted with a low rustle. Pride cracked into something quieter. Even Roar, frozen by the staging area, locked eyes on the names. One of them burned into his own history. Keene's voice dropped, steady now. "She never asked to be honored. She never will. But that doesn't change what she is." He faced her squarely. "For the record, Chief, welcome home." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. In that silence, she said more than 100 parades ever could. Travis Rock stayed rooted long after the ceremony ended. He watched Eden pack her tools in quiet, watched Keene disappear back into the SUV, but the weight in his chest didn't shift. Aaron Cross. That name had been his blood before it was ever ink on her skin. Aaron, The older cousin who'd taught him knots, climbing, and marksmanship. The one who shielded him when their father was drunk. The one who always said, "One day you'll serve, but you'd better serve right." They'd taken different paths into the Navy, but never lost touch until Aaron's last deployment. Then nothing. Closed casket. No details. Just a folded flag and a letter that told him nothing at all. Rock had carried that bitterness for years, until today, when he saw Aaron's name on the shoulder of the woman he'd mocked and dismissed. Now, it wasn't shame pressing on him. It was grief that she'd been the one to hold Aaron's final moments, that she had paid a cost he never saw. He moved to the armory wall, hands braced, eyes shut. Ghost 7, a name he'd heard in whispered stories, now standing in daylight. Leo Delgado approached quietly, arms folded. "You feel it yet?" Rock didn't look up. Feel what? "The truth. When it lands," Rock swallowed. "I treated her like a fraud, like a joke." "And she let you," Leo said simply. "That's what ghosts do." A long silence hung between them. "She never once said Cross's name," Rock murmured. "She didn't have to," Leo replied. That evening, long after the base settled back into its routines, Rock found her behind the armory. Eden sat on a crate, sleeves rolled, cleaning a sniper bolt in the fading light. No audience, no ceremony. Just her and the quiet. He stood there, unsure if he had the right to speak. The wind kicked up, brushing a layer of dust across the ground between them. "I didn't know," he said at last. Eden didn't glance up. "I didn't know it was you," he continued. "I didn't know you were with him, that you were the one who—" The sentence broke off. "I spent years chasing answers." His voice thinned, almost brittle. "We buried Aaron without the truth. No closure. I thought, maybe someone made a mistake. Maybe someone let him die." That made her pause. Her eyes lifted, calm and unreadable. Then Rock murmured, "I learned he died protecting you." Eden rose slowly. The evening light caught her tattoo again, the 3 names glowing in the gold of the sunset. "He didn't save me," she said quietly. "He made sure the mission ended how it had to." Rock shook his head. "He would have followed you through hell. I knew him. He did." They stood like that for a beat. No rage, no blame. Just the hollow weight of shared loss. "I don't deserve to ask," Rock said, swallowing hard. "But if you're going to train anyone here, I want in." Eden studied him. Not as the officer who once mocked her, but as the younger man who had once idolized Aaron Cross. "You'll start from 0, she said. He nodded. "No pride. No shortcuts." Another nod. She handed him the unfinished sniper bolt. He took it carefully. "You'll help build them," she said, "before you ever try to lead them." Eden turned back to her kit, leaving Rock holding the fragment of a weapon he didn't yet know, but finally grasping the weight of a name. In the weeks that followed, Fort Tannisville shifted. Not in buildings. Those stayed where they always stood. Not in schedules. Drills still rang out at dawn. Boots still hit gravel in time. The change was in the air, in the unspoken rhythm that comes when respect stops being required and starts being earned. Eden never reclaimed rank, never wore a uniform, never asked for status. But every morning at 0430, before the sun crested the trees, she opened the weapons bay, lined 3 benches with stripped rifles, and waited. At first only Leo Delgado and Rock showed up. Then a couple of curious SEAL candidates who'd heard the rumors about the ghost tattoo. Then more. They didn't come for lectures. They came for the way she moved, for the precision, the quiet, and the names on her arm that meant more than ribbons ever could. She didn't teach like the others. No shouting, no punishing mistakes with humiliation, just a correction, once, maybe twice, and it stuck deeper than any barked order. Rock stayed close. Different now, leaner, quieter, sharper. He studied every movement, treated each bolt assembly like a lesson in patience. Eventually, he began helping. By the second month, Eden let him run warm-ups. She never said she trusted him, but the day she handed him her own rifle to clean, he knew. On the 10th Friday, General Keane returned. No convoy, no ceremony, just him. He watched from the edge of the field for nearly an hour. Eden corrected a grip. Leo adjusted a sight. Rock coached a recruit on feeling the click before a trigger break. When drills ended, Keane approached. "You rebuilt them," he said. "They rebuilt themselves," Eden replied. He studied her. "Come back, not to the roster, back to the mission." Her gaze didn't waver. "I never left." Then one morning she wasn't there at 0430. By 0445, Rock arrived to find the doors already open, benches set, gear aligned with her usual precision, but no Eden, no rifle. He said nothing, just began warm-up alone. Leo joined 10 minutes later. The others followed, but her absence was louder than any drill. By the third day, the rumors started, "She's gone, reassigned, pulled back into Black Ops." She was never here. On the fourth day, something new. On her bench, beneath a canvas cover, sat a small olive-green duffel. Rock was first to see it. A note lay on top, 4 words in uneven ink. "Pass it the right way." Inside, her tools. A bolt carrier rebuilt 17 times. A sidearm, spotless but long, out of regulation. And at the bottom, a single photo, faded, corners worn. 7 figures in dusty uniforms. One woman at the center, half-turned, unmistakably her. Behind it, taped flat, an Overwatch coin. Leo held it like a relic. "She's not coming back," he whispered. Rock didn't answer. His hands stayed on the duffel strap, something settling in his chest. Not grief, but resolve. She hadn't abandoned them. She'd just stepped out of the light. Weeks passed. Fort Tannisville moved with its usual precision, but there was a new current now, one that didn't come from orders or rank. It came from the bench. Eden's bench. Rock never missed a morning. 0430 sharp. Armory open, rifles laid out exactly as she had done. Sometimes Leo came, sometimes more. Sometimes it was just him in silence. The method never changed. No shouting, no ceremony, just focus, discipline, and respect earned in sweat. They called it Ghost Hour. Recruits thought it was an unofficial drill, a trick to impress command. The ones who stayed long enough understood. It wasn't about skill. It was about memory. Now and then, they'd ask who she really was. Rock always gave the same answer. She never wanted you to know. She wanted you ready. One afternoon, a new batch of trainees arrived. Among them, a sharp-eyed young corporal who seemed too young for SEAL candidacy. After the tour, she lingered near the Ghost Hour. When Rock asked why, she pointed to the Overwatch coin nailed into the bench. "My brother had one of those. Said it belonged to someone who saved his whole unit?" Rock nodded. "Then you're in the right place." That night, under the fading sky, he walked to the far wall of the compound, where old unit patches were pinned in tribute. From his pocket, he unwrapped a small cloth bundle. Her name tag. He fixed it to the wall with the same bolt she once carried in her gear. No plaque, no ceremony. Just 2 words in black marker, "Still watching." because Eden Wolf never vanished. She had become something different entirely, a presence in the way rifles were cradled with respect, a shadow etched into the hands that learned to repair as well as fire, a silence that spoke with more weight than any insignia. For every soldier who passed through Fort Tannisville after that day, Ghost Hour carried a single, unspoken code. No cutting corners, no idle chatter, and never, under any circumstance, disrespect the bench. Her name never made its way onto a memorial wall. No flag was folded in her honor. No headline broke across the nation. All that marked her legacy was a bolt, a bench, and the countless warriors she quietly forged from the edges of the spotlight. Eden Wolf never sought remembrance, only to ensure no one else faded away. Thank you for watching this chapter on Veteran Biker. If her silence reached you louder than any words could, we want to hear it. Share in the comments which part of Eden's journey stayed with you. Have you crossed paths with someone like her? Your voices are what make this community strong. Like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss the next story. That cuts just as deep. And if you're ready for more, the next tales await on your screen. Each one unearthing a truth, a legacy, or a warrior hidden in plain sight. Until then, ride with purpose, and remember the quiet ones who carried us all. Tank tops aren't regs, sweetheart. Cover up. You're making the real soldiers nervous. The voice sliced across the range. Eden Wolf didn't flinch. She remained crouched by the weapon rack, tightening a scope with unhurried precision. Then it happened. Her shoulder shifted, revealing the ink. Skull, anchor, Trident, and 3 names etched beneath. SEAL Team 6. The range fell silent. Then came the measured thump of boots, polished leather, the kind belonging only to top brass. General Marcus Keene stepped into view. No words, no blink. Just his gaze fixed on the tattoo, before he slowly raised a hand in salute. The man who had mocked her snorted. This some kind of joke? She rose to her full height, met his eyes, and said, "Cold as steel, those names. One of them died saving you." He didn't get it. Not yet. But he would. What followed stopped the entire base in its tracks. The clang of steel echoed under Fort Tannisville's armory canopy. Orders barked, bolts slammed. The heat shimmered over rows of soldiers. Few noticed the lone figure at the far end, a contractor in olive fatigues, methodically scrubbing carbon from an M4. Eden's movements were deliberate, the kind that came from muscle memory earned in darker places. Her work jacket slid from one shoulder as she leaned forward, and the ink came into view. Military precise lines formed the skull, Trident, and anchor, a unit mark not spoken aloud unless you'd bled under its flag. A private froze mid-motion. His partner followed his gaze and nearly dropped his cleaning rod. "Holy hell," he muttered. Then more heads turned. Laughter died. The air shifted. From the catwalk above, boots appeared, ones that belonged to neither trainee nor instructor. Keene stepped forward, stalling mid-stride as if he'd hit an invisible wall. A man not easily shaken. 3 Afghanistan tours, 2 combat wounds, a Bronze Star for valor. And yet, his focus locked on her arm, on what it meant. He descended slowly. Soldiers paused in place, even the hardest NCOs going still. Eden hadn't spoken. She hadn't drawn a weapon. But the range felt different now. Keene stopped 3 paces away, eyes narrowing as recognition flickered. She hadn't aged a day beyond the last image buried in her classified file. Her braid shorter, her eyes sharper, her stance still the same, calculating exits without moving her head. "Chief Wolf." it came out more reverence than rank. The tension coiled tight in the air. Eden turned her head, eyes meeting his. Measured, cautious recognition. The general raised a salute. Not out of protocol, but a debt owed. She didn't return it, only held his gaze. And in that single, unmoving moment, the rest of the base began to understand who they were looking at. A woman in a sweat-darkened tank top, rag in one hand, a rifle stretched across her bench, and a presence that felt more like a ghost than flesh. One of theirs. One of the shadows passed between soldiers in half-whispered rumors during midnight watches or over cheap beer. No one would admit to hearing the tale of a female SEAL, forbidden by protocol, who vanished after a mission that never existed on paper. Yet here she was, standing in daylight, silent, wearing the mark of a unit most men couldn't even bring themselves to name. "Permission to stand in your shadow," Keene said quietly. The words cut through the range. A ripple passed over the soldiers, drills forgotten mid-motion. A few turned fully, some lowering their weapons to low ready. Eden gave a single nod, so small it could have been missed. It was enough. Keene dropped his salute. "She was never supposed to be seen again," he murmured, almost to himself. "But, hell, you brought the ghosts back, didn't you?" He turned to his aide. "Clear the schedule." And just like that, the most senior officer on base wiped his day, clean to stand beside a woman who hadn't spoken more than a handful of words in years. Because sometimes ink outshouts metals, and ghosts don't need orders to keep haunting the living. Long before the myth in the tank top, Eden Wolf was nothing more than a scribbled name in the margins of classified paperwork. An outlier, flagged not for troublemaking, but for potential that put command on edge. She was 23 when she entered Naval Special Warfare Prep, already outpacing most men in endurance, accuracy, and psychological grit. The instructors weren't sure how to handle her. No woman had ever come this far in that pipeline. They tried to crack her early, dropped her into the crucible, a 72-hour survival gauntlet meant to strip away body and ego. No food, no backup, no light, no map, only objectives and raw wilderness. On the second night, with temperatures plunging below zero, search teams nearly pulled her for frostbite. By dawn, she'd already hit her third extraction point. They found her cooking a rat over a tin can stove. She looked up once, nodded, and said, "Not the worst vacation I've had." Somewhere in the shadows, someone started taking her seriously. Not officially, of course. She was moved to an unlisted roster, tested quietly against live scenarios that never made it into the logs. One of those sent her to the Syrian border, embedded with a contractor team under rumored assault by cartel-backed insurgents. She went in with a pack, an encrypted sat phone, and a sidearm. 5 days later, she came out with 17 souls alive, civilians included, and no headlines, no medals. Just another invisible entry in a file stamped eyes only. By her 5th year, she was Ghost 7, part of a prototype unit operating without oversight, called in only when diplomacy had failed and open warfare was unacceptable. Ghosts weren't a nickname, it was their function. They entered places no one admitted existed, left without a trace, and carried missions buried deeper than Arlington's stones. There were 7 members in Ghost Team Delta. No real names, only call signs. Eden's was Ghost 7. The others kept theirs etched on gear, never spoken aloud. Safer that way. Cleaner. Operation Ember Lens wasn't supposed to spill blood. It was a quiet grab. Intercept a rogue CIA asset selling classified arms to a hostile militia near the Pakistan-Afghan border. Retrieve the data package. Get out. They'd done more with less. But someone in a suit far away rerouted their evac, dropping them into overlapping tribal faction territory. A kill box. 3 died in the first 20 minutes. Marcus Chen took shrapnel to the lungs. Jacob Reyes fell, covering the east flank. Aaron Cross dragged Eden out of a sniper's scope and took the round meant for her throat. She killed 14 men in under an hour. No rifle, just a knife, and the sidearm she would later hang in her garage out of guilt. She carried Cross's body for more than a mile before evac forced her to let go. She came home with their blood still in her hair. The Navy offered her the Distinguished Service Cross. She refused. "Medals are for graves," she said. "The living carry the weight." Within 6 days, her resignation was filed, the record sealed, the team buried under classified operational loss. Eden Wolf disappeared. The only proof she'd ever served were 3 names inked beneath the trident on her arm: Chen, Reyes, Cross. For 5 years, no one spoke her name. Until a 4-star general recognized the ink no one was supposed to see. Life at Fort Tannisville fell into repetition. Sunrise weapons checks, midday drills, the dusk wind carrying the scent of oil and spent powder. Iden arrived before Reveille, parking in the far lot and walking the stretch to the armory, with a metal case in one hand and silence in the other. No greetings, no small talk. She wasn't on the chain of command, just a civilian contractor, a ghost with a toolkit. To most, she was the woman who cleaned rifles, and sometimes the subject of worse commentary. Sergeant Travis Rock made sure of that, tall, lean, loud, and grinning like every sentence he spoke was the setup to someone else's humiliation. His crew respected him for speed, grit, and the uncanny knack for spotting flaws from half a field away, and he pegged Eden as one, or, at best, misplaced. He made it a pastime. "Hey, Wolf!" he called one morning, flinging a rag dripping Chilean pesos onto her bench. "Pretty sure you missed a spot on the latrine door yesterday. Want me to draw you a map?" She gave no reply, only kept tending the chamber of a scarred M27 with long, precise strokes. Another soldier snorted. "Heard she landed this gig through some vet's outreach thing. Charity slot." "Probably married someone who actually served," another tossed in. Rock's grin widened. Maybe she figures standing near rifles makes her dangerous by osmosis. Eden didn't glance up. The bolt carrier locked with a muted click. No reprimands came. No pushback either. The air around her carried silence that had been learned. Young soldiers copied their sergeant's lead. The older ones, who might have known better, looked elsewhere. But Eden Wolf didn't fit their picture. She never used manuals, never rechecked torque settings, never asked for approval on part swaps. Her movements were too exact, as though practiced in blackout, under stress, with time and blood pressing down. More than once, an operator brought her a failing sidearm and got it back within 20 minutes, running smoother than pre-deployment. Still, she stayed the quiet shadow in the corner. By the 3rd week, Rock chose to push harder. He walked into the armory mid-morning with an old SR-25 held like an offering. The matte coat was chipped, the scope off kilter, the sling frayed as if dragged through grit and disgrace. Conversation died as he crossed to Eden's station point. "All right, folks," he said, casual but carrying. "Let's run a little test." He let the rifle drop onto her table with a clang. Our contractor here thinks she's got skills. Let's see. His smirk deepened. Call it continuing education. Some of the younger ones laughed. Eden stayed still, set the barrel she'd been cleaning aside, and reached for the SR-25 with a reverence reserved for relics or hazards. Take your time, sweetheart, Rock said, arms folded. We know thinking isn't your strong suit. She didn't answer. She turned the rifle once, eyes tracing the upper receiver, the mag well, the scope mount. She didn't strip it, didn't power it on. Gas tubes bent, she murmured. 3 degrees off center. Steel-cased rounds, 700 plus. Ports scored. Buffer springs been overcompressed. Mounts loose. Stress marks here and here. 2 taps. Trigger groups full of dust. Left it chambered in a sandstorm, or something dumb. Heat expansion microcracks near locking lugs. This isn't just dirty. It's dying. The room froze. Rock blinked. She hadn't opened it, hadn't cleared it. Yet every flaw she named was right there, if you looked hard enough. His laugh came out thin. Lucky guesses. She turned back to her cloth and resumed on the M27 like nothing had happened. But the air shifted. Those who used to smirk now watched with something else. Not respect, not yet, but wariness, and a colder thing. Doubt. They didn't know her. They were starting to suspect they didn't know what she was. By week's end, Rock was quieter. Not sorry, never that, but raw-edged, as if she scratched at him like an invisible danger. She'd beaten his test, and worse, done it without effort. His unit wasn't laughing anymore. They were watching. So he upped the stakes. Armory eval's coming, he said at roll call. Senior command wants readiness tested live. Wolf, your lead. I'm not on the roster, she said. You are now. No smile this time. Rock had planned it. 3 rifles seated with faults too fine for most eyes. Loose pins, mismatched buffers. A backwards assembled trigger group, still working well enough to pass casual checks. Sabotage meant to fail slow and humiliate loud. The inspection bay drew half the barracks, some eager to see her stumble, others curious. She moved through with steady precision. Sight, touch, memory. No show. On the second rifle, she stopped. Wrong locking lug. Bolt carrier from a different lot. It'll fracture under recoil. An inspector frowned, cross-checked, and nodded. By the third weapon, the crowd had gone still. Rock's jaw flexed. The snare had failed. And then it didn't. Just not how he pictured. As Eden leaned to check the final carbine on the rack, her tank top shifted. Heat pressed in. The jacket had long since been knotted at her waist. Sweat traced the slope of her shoulder and upper back, and above the blade sliding into view was the tattoo. Not the half glimpse from earlier. This time, all of it. SEAL Team 6. Skull, anchor, trident, and beneath, 3 stars. The names etched so small they seemed seared in. A corporal across the room spotted it first. He froze, nudged the soldier beside him. That one drew his phone, not to film, but to zoom, to verify. He spoke no word, only pushed the still to the unit's internal feed without a caption. In 7 minutes, the image had swept the base. In 10, it reached a man who hadn't seen that mark in over 10 years, General Marcus Keene. When he opened it on his secure tablet, he halted mid-stride in a hallway. His grip tightened around the frame until his knuckles blanched. It wasn't only the tattoo. It was the skin beneath, the faint gloss of scarred tissue, the exactness of the lines, the angle of that shoulder. He'd seen it once before, in a field hospital, in Helmand, after Ghost 7 had dragged his recon unit out of an ambush that should have left them as names on a memorial wall. He tapped his comm. Divert my route, reroute my staff. I want eyes on Fort Tannisville Armory in 20, quietly. Sir? His aide asked, startled. I said 20. Clear the corridor. Back at the base range, Eden was finishing the inspection. The room had gone unnervingly still. Whispers spun through corners. Faces turned toward her, not with ridicule now, but with something nearer reverence. She seemed unaware, but Rowe noticed. He watched the change roll in like a front, saw the smirks traded for locked jaws, noticed no one laughed when she passed. He caught the quiet murmurs. Did you see that ink? And the way a private straightened when she brushed his shoulder. Something crept up his spine. He returned to quarters, accessed the secure archive with a clearance code unused in 2 years, searched for a unit that didn't exist on paper, found one declassified still from an old hostage rescue. Grainy, dust-choked, but the central figure, knife in one hand, pistol in the other, face turned, had a stance that made his pulse quicken. There were rumors about ghosts, about women who served where they weren't meant to, units without a flag. He zoomed on the left arm. The Trident was there, just like hers. By morning, the silence around Eden had shifted tone. It wasn't cold anymore, just careful. She entered with the same quiet ease, jacket tied loose, tank top damp from the blistering heat. No one called her out. No rags were tossed. The humor beneath their feet had cracked, and no one wanted to stand over the fault. But Rock wasn't done. He lingered past the loading bay, arms folded, eyes fixed as she unpacked a rifle case. He didn't blink. You hiding something, Wolf? She didn't answer. Just check the buffer on an M4 and move along. He stepped in. That ink's seal, right? Looks damn real. Maybe too real. You know, impersonating special warfare is a federal crime. She slid the bolt home. Even if you did serve, wearing something unearned. Then what? She cut in, voice like steel. He hesitated. You think that stare scares me? I've seen worse lies from operators. You act like a puzzle, letting us fill in the pieces. I didn't let you, she said. You decided to guess. It was the most she'd spoken in a month. Rock leaned closer. You don't stand there with 3 names on your arm unless you can prove them. Her eyes narrowed, not with threat, but with loss. They're not mine to prove, she said. They're mine to remember. He drew back, as if hit. No rage, no challenge, only truth and grief that stayed after the sound was gone. The moment ended without a shout, without a blow, just a tension that clung to the air. Eden returned to work. She always did. But someone had been watching. Leo Delgado stepped from the shadowed racks of the long rifles. Few noticed he'd even been there. Leo had a way of being invisible, until he wasn't. His sleeves were rolled, palms dark with grease, but his walk was still that of a man reading terrain. He stopped beside Eden's bench. She didn't glance up, but he gave a single nod anyway. Toward Rock, still holding his place near the doorway, Leo spoke loudly enough for every set of ears in the room to catch it. Ever wonder why nobody's laid a hand on her all this time? Rock's gaze narrowed. What are you getting at? Leo peeled the wrap from his forearm and pushed his sleeve higher. Faded into the skin of his upper arm was a trident nearly matching Eden's, the same curve of anchor, the same dagger behind the skull, except his carried one extra slash, an Overwatch mark. I was Cross's swim buddy, Leo said, voice lower now. Bud/S249. He wrote me before he deployed. Told me if something went wrong, someone would carry the weight. His eyes flicked to Eden, then back to Rock. She never asked for backup, but some ghosts aren't meant to walk alone. Eden didn't respond, still bent over the trigger assembly on her bench. But her hands stalled for a fraction of a second, long enough to register the shift in the air. Rock studied the two of them. "You've been watching her?" Leo nodded. "The whole time. Because I knew sooner or later someone wouldn't understand what she carries, and they'd need reminding." The room stayed motionless. Even the usual low laughter had vanished. Because when two ghosts appear in daylight, the only respectful move is silence. The sky over Fort Tannisville that morning was spotless, a surgical blue that made every scrap of steel glare like a blade. Soldiers stood in perfect ranks across the west field, boots aligned, rifles shouldered, the low thrum of inspection anticipation running through the air like static. Every crease, every polished edge mattered. Sweat dared not fall without approval. The brass was on its way. Everyone felt it. No one guessed who would. Step from the armored black SUV that braked just beyond the parade line. 4 stars shone from the shoulder boards of General Marcus Keene. His frame was taut despite years of wear. His face unreadable, calm like the seconds before artillery lands. Dress greens today, because when ghosts return, you meet them in full regalia. He didn't speak when his aide exited beside him. No greeting for the base commander, no handshake. His gaze cut the field until it locked on her. Eden stood apart from formation near the weapons staging area. Tank top, boots, jacket tied at her waist, tattoo fully visible. Keene moved before protocol could catch him, threading through rows of enlisted men like wind slicing tall grass. People shifted aside, confused, rules bending in real time. "Sir, do you need a podium?" the base colonel asked, hurrying after him. Keene ignored it. Past the front line, another 10 paces, until he stood before Eden Wolfe. She didn't flinch, salute, or speak. Keene did what no one had witnessed in decades, a 4-star saluting someone out of uniform. His right hand rose sharp and precise, fingers locked, eyes on her, not as a superior, but as an equal, a relic, a myth. Eden blinked once. Her expression never shifted, yet the base collectively held its breath. This wasn't in any manual. Every soldier, SEAL, Ranger, officer, eyes off the flag, fixed on her. Keene lowered his hand like it was part of a ceremony older than any regulation. His voice carried without amplification. "Chief Petty Officer Eden Wolfe, Ghost 7, first of her kind, last of her team, sole survivor of Operation Ember Lens." The impact rippled. Gasps, stares. A young SEAL nearly lost his grip on his rifle. "She's the reason I'm alive," Keene continued. "Her team saved mine in Kandahar. We were pinned, no way out, until a ghost stepped through the dust. She dropped 3 hostiles before we could blink, dragged one of ours half a click under fire, and vanished before we could thank her. 15 years I've waited to salute her. Today, I finally can." The silence deepened. Eden slowly tugged her tank top higher over her shoulder, revealing the tattoo in full, SEAL Team 6's skull and trident, anchor beneath, and 3 names inked below: Marcus Chen, Jacob Reyes, Aaron Cross. Under them, in thin script, "Never forgotten." The ranks stirred, not in noise, but in the weight that shifts when pride collapses into humility. Even Roar, rigid at the staging perimeter, stopped breathing when he saw those names, one of them carved into his own history. Keen's voice softened. She never asked for honor, never will, but it doesn't change what she is. He faced her once more. For the record, Chief, welcome home. Eden didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence said more than 100 parades. Travis Rock stayed rooted an hour after the ceremony ended. He lingered as soldiers filed away, as Eden packed her gear, as Keen disappeared into the SUV. The weight in his chest didn't ease. Aaron Cross, that name had been in his memory long before it ever appeared on Eden Wolf's skin. Aaron hadn't been just another SEAL in a legendary ghost unit. He'd been the one who always told her, "One day you'll wear the uniform too, but you'd better do it right." Their careers had taken separate routes into the Navy, but they never lost touch until Aaron's final tour. Then nothing. The only message the family received was that he died during an operation too classified to discuss. Closed casket, no explanation. A folded flag and a letter filled with words that meant nothing at all. Rock had carried that weight for years, a bitterness that never loosened its grip, until today. Until he saw Aaron's name inked into the arm of the woman he'd ridiculed, mocked, tried to strip of dignity. Shame wasn't what rose in him now. It was grief, raw, unfiltered grief, that she, not him, had been there for Aaron's last breath, that she had carried the cost he'd never even seen. The same woman he'd tried to crush. He moved to the far wall of the armory, set both hands against the steel, and stood motionless. Eyes shut, shoulders locked. He knew that name from the old whispers. Ghost -7. Spoken rarely, never explained. Now it had a face. Leo Delgado approached quietly, saying nothing at first, his arms folded as they both stared at the shifting gravel. "You feel it yet?" Leo finally asked. Rock didn't move. "Feel what?" "The truth, when it hits." Rock's voice came thick. "I spent weeks calling her a fraud, a joke." Leo's nod was slow. "And she let you, because that's what ghosts do." They stood in long silence. Then Rock said, almost to himself, "She never once said Cross's name. Not to me, not to anyone." "She didn't have to," Leo replied softly. That evening, long after most of the base had settled, Rock found her alone behind the armory. Eden sat on a crate, sleeves rolled up, tending to a sniper bolt in the last light of day. No audience, no noise. Only the ritual of silence. He hovered there, unsure if he deserved to speak. The wind rose, scattering dust between them. "I didn't know," he said at last. She didn't look up. "I didn't know it was you," he added, "that you were with him, that you were the one who's—" He couldn't finish. "I searched for answers for years," he went on, his voice breaking. "We buried Aaron with no truth, no closure. I thought maybe someone had failed him, let him die." Her gaze finally lifted, steady and unreadable, and Rock whispered, "I found out he died saving you." Eden rose. The sunset lit her tattoo. 3 names in the fading gold. "He didn't save me," she said quietly. "He made sure the mission ended the way it had to." Rock shook his head. "He would have followed you into hell." "He did." They stood in that shared stillness. No accusation, no rage, only the hollow echo of loss. "I don't deserve to ask this," Rock said carefully, "but if you're training anyone here, I want in." She studied him, not as an officer or as the man who'd tried to humiliate her, but as the boy who once admired Aaron Cross. "You'll have to start over," he nodded. "No ego, no shortcuts." Another nod. She handed him the unfinished sniper bolt. You'll help build them, she told him, before you try to lead them. Then she turned back to her kit, leaving Rock holding a weapon part he didn't yet understand, but finally knowing the weight of a name. Over the next weeks, Fort Tannisville began to change. The buildings remained the same, the drills still echoed each morning, and boots still hit gravel in unison. But the atmosphere shifted. Respect no longer came from rank. It became something to chase. Eden Wolf never wore a rank again, never signed back into service, never asked for status. But at 04:30 every morning, before the first light touched the tree line, she opened the weapons bay, laid out stripped rifles across 3 benches, and waited. At first, it was only Leo Delgado and Rock. Then a couple of curious SEAL candidates who'd heard rumors about the woman with the ghost-marked arm. More followed. They didn't come for speeches. They came for the way she moved, for her precision, for the names on her skin that carried more weight than medals. Her instruction was different. No shouting, no punishing sloppiness with barked orders. She'd correct a stance once, maybe twice, and it stuck. Rock stayed close. Leaner now, quieter, sharper. He watched her every move, learning every unspoken rule, treating every bolt assembly like a lesson in patience. In time, he began to assist. By the second month, she let him lead warm-ups. She never said she trusted him, but the day she handed him her personal rifle to clean, he understood. On the 10th Friday, General Keene returned. No convoy, no staff, just him. He stood at the edge of the training field for nearly an hour, silent, watching. Eden adjust a grip, Leo align a sight, Rock teaching recruits to feel the click before the triggers break. When it was over, Keene stepped forward. "You rebuilt them," he said. Eden shook her head once. "They rebuilt themselves." He studied her. "Come back. Not to the roster. To the mission." Her gaze didn't waver. "I never left." Change crept in quietly. One morning, Eden didn't unlock the armory. At 04:45, Rock arrived to find it already open. Benches laid out, gear ready with her usual precision. But she was gone. So was her rifle. Rock said nothing. He simply picked up the first weapon and began the warm-up, alone. He was Blood. The older cousin who taught Rock to climb trees, tie knots, shoot straight. The one who covered for him when their dad came home drunk. On the 4th morning, she was still gone. But on Eden's bench, folded neatly under a canvas top, sat a small olive-green duffel. Rock was the first to see it. A torn MRE wrapper lay on top, 4 words scrawled in black ink. "Pass it the right way." Inside, her tools, a bolt carrier she'd rebuilt 17 times, a sidearm long out of regulation but spotless, and at the bottom, a single worn photo. 7 figures in dusty uniforms, no names. One woman in the center, turned just enough to be almost unrecognizable. Behind it, taped flat, an Overwatch coin. Leo turned it over in his hand like a relic. "She's not coming back," he said quietly. Rock didn't answer. His grip tightened on the duffel strap, but in his chest, something settled. Not grief, not loss. Legacy. Weeks passed. Fort Tannisville kept its military rhythm, reveille, formation, drills, but a different beat grew in the shadows. From the bench, her bench, Rock never missed a morning. 0430 sharp. Armory unlocked, weapons laid out exactly as she had done. Some days it was a full class, others just silence. No yelling, no rank. Just steel, breath, focus. Respect, not given, earned. They called it Ghost Hour. Most recruits thought it was just an unofficial drill. Those who stayed learned the truth. It wasn't about performance. It was about memory, precision, discipline born from loss. One day, a sharp-eyed young corporal lingered after the tour, staring at the Overwatch coin nailed into the bench. "My brother had one of those," she said. "Said it belonged to someone who saved his whole unit." Rock nodded. "Then you're already in the right place." That night, under a fading sky, Rock walked to the stone wall where old unit patches were pinned. From his pocket, he took a small bundle wrapped in cloth, her name tag. He fixed it to the wall with the same bolt she used to carry in her gear bag. No plaque, no ceremony. Just 2 words in black marker. Still watching. Eden Wolf hadn't vanished. She'd simply stepped into the shadows, into the way rifles were handled with reverence, into the quiet discipline that outlasted orders, into the hands that learned to fix before they fired. And at Fort Tannisville, Ghost Hour carried only 3 rules. No shortcuts, no questions. Never dishonor the bench. Her name would never be etched in marble, but her legacy was written in steel and silence, and in a generation shaped by a woman who never asked to be remembered. She just made sure no one else was forgotten.